Well, to be the President of the United States, you have to be a smart person, not just other people saying you're smart, or you saying you're smart, or them thinking you're smart. It needs to be historically demonstrated by your history. And that's not Trump. Trump is the opposite. People have been saying he's the dumbest person they've ever met for a long time. All the way back to Wharton, again, to the professor who said he was the dumbest GD student he ever taught. And that's GD is a curse word. Damn. So, it goes on to people like Bolton, who said other things, and his sister, who said he's effing stupid. Now, that's all true, and when you put together the fact that he's old and into dementia at this point, it's not pretty. Now, here's a video that you should watch all the way through yourself. This is going to jump into to the video at about 430 seconds, where the guest is saying something. And then I'm going to try and find two other quotes he says. But this video deals with everything from tariffs to the real issue about oil globally on the planet. Deals with some of the aspects of what's the difference between sour crude and sweet crude. Our refineries don't do sweet crude very well. We sell that. Our refineries want heavy sour crude, and we buy that. We're buying that from Canada, and we were buying it from Russia, and we were buying it from Venezuela. And there's only certain places, where you get it, and it's not pretty. It comes on a ship, but it's basically tar. It's thick stuff. Russia's sour crude is so heavy and waxy and watery that just the temperature of the water on the hull, by the time it gets where it's going, in this case maybe India or China, that oil is solid. They have to heat it to get it out of the ship. So, there's a lot more to this than just drill, baby, drill, and they say that in this video. So there's a URL up at the top. You can stop at the T = ampersand 430. There's the title. There's the publisher or content creator. And this is the date that it was posted. So it is current and relevant as of this date, which is, May 5th. So here we go.
Bond purchases, stock purchases, and we've seen that. We've actually seen an incredible weakness in the U.S. Treasury market, which has not been seen at this scale before. That's what caused Trump to flinch 3 or 4 weeks ago. The tyranny of the capitalist system. It just doesn't like tariffs, and keep in mind, eventually the U.S. consumer is going to figure out that tariffs are a tax on their spending. China's not going to pay dollar for dollar on a tariff. Canada's not going to do that. This is a tax that is not an income tax. It's a consumptive tax, a consumption tax that is going to really undermine the low earners and the low wealth members of the U.S. economy. Speaking of that.
And, can't be said pretty much any cleaner. A lot of people use so many words. So, I'm going to try and find the next thing he says. Which I think is somewhere around here.
You can see that's not the case. Now, the Energy Information Agency released this week data showing that the oil patch, the U.S. oil patch, is a lot less leveraged than it has been. So the oil patch itself is in better a better position financially than it has been for previous downturns. Keep in mind that U.S. equities in the oil patch, this is the worst performing sector across the Standard & Poor's index. It has been for the last dozen years plus. Wall Street's just not putting money into oil and gas, and not the high-cost producers. The areas out in the Permian, that's 4 million barrels a day. A lot of it's very light stuff that goes out as NGLs that actually doesn't achieve the same price as WTI because the U.S. has essentially flooded the market with exports of things that we used to have to make in refineries, and so the price received for that is less than half of WTI, and so the cost of getting that real barrel of crude out.
NGL is natural gas light, I think it is. I think maybe he'll define it later on.
Has gone up as the wells become gassier, as more of the light liquids are produced. We have all the light oil and light liquids we need for the U.S. We have to export them now.
And he's talking about light, sweet crude oil, which we don't refine here in the United States. Our refineries aren't made for.
That's a challenge. It's an issue of matching up what we produce with what we need and what we can refine.
Right, and just for some viewers who aren't aware, NGL means natural gas liquids.
Right.
Which are often used in petrochemicals, like ethanes and propanes and so on. So, Ed, you referenced the OPEC's decision to increase production in June by 411,000 barrels. This is starting to look reminiscent of late 2014 when the Saudis basically, OPEC opened up the taps and drove the price down to, I think at one point, like $23 a barrel or something. But it was low, and the idea was to drive the shale producers out of the market. Didn't work because the shale producers innovated. Are we seeing a repetition of the Saudi and OPEC strategy?
I think we are. Trump called for lower oil prices all through his administration, Trump 1.0, and even considering and eliminating the downturn due to the COVID shutdown, which he presided over. The average price of oil was less in Trump 1.0 than it was during the Obama administration or the Biden administration.
So what he's trying to say is basically, and he says that exactly. He says, "Drill, baby, drill won't work," and that's because first of all, the oil fields are becoming more depleted. It's harder to get the oil out of the ground. So the price of oil right now is dropping. And the Saudis have announced that they're going to produce another 400 million or something barrels per day, or whatever it is. And that equates to actually a slap on Putin. Because when the global price of oil goes down, Putin's value of the oil he's shipping goes down. And that's the only way he's funding his war machine right now is the oil exports. It's bad enough, the estimates have been across the economic spectrum that when it drops, price drops below $40, 46 I think it is, $46 a barrel, Russia's losing money. They're going to be losing money. Isn't worth shipping it. In the first place, their refineries have been hit. Russia's refineries have been hit very hard by the Ukrainians. A lot of them are tatters. And so when the Saudis drop the price of oil even more, that's a help to Ukraine. So in the end, he concludes by saying, Trump doesn't understand the world economy. And the world economy does run on oil. And nobody wants to drill, baby, drill in America because it is getting harder to get out of the ground. Anyway, we're not sitting on unlimited amounts of oil. That's what you get when you get an old man who somehow thinks time stopped and stands still for him. There is no way that an expanding U.S. economy, people driving cars, burning oil every day, using oil every day, that there is not an unlimited amount of oil under our feet. We are not sitting on unlimited liquid gold, as Mr. Trump seems to think. But this is dementia. This is how people are. I remember a woman that used to be a clerk in a mail facility and would go in there on occasion, and she'd be talking about 1944. You know, it's like she was 80, had to be over 80 years old. She died soon thereafter. She was the owner of the business, but that's what happens when their brains come apart, and the brain will come apart. The brain is an interesting organ that uses memories, neurons and memories, to formulate thought. And first of all, if you don't have the right memories, like if you don't have scientific knowledge, you're not going to come up with scientific thought. If you have gangster knowledge, that's all you're going to do is think like a gangster. And it sounds simplistic, but that's how it is. People who are baseball players are never going to be mathematicians. And that's not to say that brain may not have had the capability to do it, but certain brains aren't going to be able to think logically. There's a lot of complications that go with genetics that humans are just refusing to explore. So Mr. Trump is not suited to be the president of the United States for a variety of reasons. The biggest one being he's antithetical to the entire Constitution. His whole thought process is of racism and superiority based on skin color and other things that he thinks are relevant. Just doesn't fly. Now, we have yet to see in the future whether the Supreme Court is going to put a stop to him or not. But it's not the Supreme Court's job. It is actually the job of Congress. Congress, and it doesn't have to be, don't think of Congress as in majority-minority. Think of Congress as in interpreting the Constitution. And the Constitution has a minority clause in the document for those who want to rebel against it. And that's Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. You know, it only takes one person to file a resolution under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment claiming that any member of government is rebelling against it. And if you can't find 2/3 majority to excuse that conduct, then you not only does it stop, you're fired. It is just really that simple. And if these people, these Democrats at this point, these Dumbocrats would realize that they have all the power in the world because of righteousness, like certain people say, Jessica Denson say, oh, their souls are vacuous, then put that into a Section 3 of the 14th Amendment resolution. Describe how their souls are vacuous against what the Constitution says they are supposed to be. And then you clean them out of government. It's just that simple. But these Democrats, these Dumbocrats, are thinking in terms of, we have to be majority to get anything done. No, you don't. You just have to be following the Constitution. The Constitution gives you all the strength that you need, and they keep talking about rule of law day, blah, blah, blah. They don't even know what they're saying. Because if they did, we wouldn't be in this right now. Who's really failing us are the Democrats in Congress. This is Legal AF, the once Midas Touch Network, before Popak and Mycellus split apart. This is Popak's channel. He's got a bunch of old fogies on here talking about how Hitler and Trump are pretty much the same. Now, we all know that because, Trump was known to have a copy of Mein Kampf at his bedside, his night table. He didn't read anything else, but he did read Hitler's Mein Kampf. He's a racist, been a racist all the way back. If you look at one of our previous videos, he talks about the Indian Gaming Commission, how the Indians don't look like Indians to him, ergo Native Americans. But they were using the word Indian. It's just sad that, certain people don't want to be human. They want to be racists because racists aren't human. Humans get along with each other. Racists think they're superior. And this is going to jump to the point where one of his guests makes a quote that I'm going to hook right behind it to Jessica Denson naming names. There's the URL up at the top. You can stop at the ampersand T equals 1065 because that's where it's jumping to. There's the title, Legal AF, and there's the date it was posted, May 2nd. Now, all of this does no good because none of it presents a solution. But you're welcome to go watch this if you want to hear the historic comparison to Hitler.
Which I'll return to several times, is that if American democracy succumbs to authoritarianism, it will be because too many people in positions of great power, especially the Republican senators of the United States Senate, refuse to use readily available checks and balances in the United States Constitution that could have prevented Trump from defying the rule of law, dismissing economic common sense, rejecting the findings of modern science, dismissing the remarkable accomplishments of 8 decades of all in all, with blemishes, all in all successful American global leadership.
Right now is the moment, not in the midterms in 2026. Right now, Eric Swalwell. Right now, Jamie Raskin. Right now, Pete Aguilar. Right now, Jasmine Crockett, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Cory Booker, everyone who is staging a popular, diagnosis, but not doing the remedy. Now is the time. We are watching you. What are you going to do?
She calls names. She's right about that. They go on the media and they gaslight the American people, acting like they can't do anything. This is like, the police department standing there. What do you want us to do? They know exactly what's going on, and they won't act. They won't act because they're afraid for their lives. And I can't disagree. But one person so far, Stan Adair, has filed the articles of impeachment. He's just gone down the wrong road. It's just the wrong thing. What needs to be done is he needs to be lobbied to file a resolution to call for the amnesty vote. It's not an amnesty act. It's not legislation that's called an act. It's never going to be codified into any form of law because it's in personam private legislation. And this is what Jessica doesn't understand. Richard Painter, he understands that he's not going to sit up there and try and school and correct her, because when he does, she doesn't listen. You have to watch this a couple times, and he's saying one thing, and then she says something completely different that isn't even on point. And then she's all over the map and onto these emotional aspects about they have vacuous souls. What the that has nothing to do with it. You can have a vacuous soul and be an American. You can follow the Constitution with a vacuous soul. You know, there is no such thing as a soul in the first place. What has to do with it is you need to drop that stuff. Drop that religious crap. Drop that stuff and understand you live in a country under a contract called the Constitution. And the people who want to live here need to support and defend that Constitution. So it is the Democrats who are to blame. She's called a few names. On that, she's correct. Now, this is where she's going to get into where she says they don't even have to bring a motion in any chamber. They just need to talk about Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And, of course, she's absolutely wrong.
They're not creative. They're friggin' devious on that side as to how to tear things down and shred the Constitution. We got to be friggin' creative and think outside the box and be using everything at our disposal.
And she refuses to be creative outside of the box. There's little of any way to contact her directly and make suggestions or make legal analysis. I encourage you to go watch this particular show only because at 23 minutes in, she begins the interview with Richard Painter, who is a law professor at the University of Minnesota Law School. And as you can see, this is 46 minutes in. So, you know, this is over 20 minutes of an interview that started, you know, at 23 minutes in. So, here.
Yes, in the comments. I'm going to ask you because it's where this show gave birth to the 14th Now movement, which of course was about invoking Section 3. We debunked all of the myths about Section 3 not being viable after Trump v. Anderson. One thing that is still another possibility.
No, you didn't debunk them, because if you had, there would have been a successful 14th Now movement. It is not. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, as has been explained by this content creator over and over again, is not the way you keep saying it, Ms. Denson. So let's go on.
In addition to impeachment, is the raising of an amnesty act by a senator, and I bring this up all the time. This doesn't even have to be an actual motion in one of the chambers of Congress. It could just be a comment.
There you go. She's wrong. The Supreme Court has said that is exactly what must happen in order for Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to be actualized. Congress must act to enforce it. And it's like, ding dong, lights are on, nobody's home. If she would listen to somebody, it might be successful. The sad reality is she's leading millions, well, thousands, 93,000 at least on Blue Sky. And she's got it wrong. This is just wrong. Indicates how wrong she is.
Conversation started by any one of these lawmakers. Donald Trump is currently, which is why I always call him illegal, disqualified from the presidency under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
No, he's not. Read the Trump v. Anderson ruling. He becomes disqualified if and only if someone actually files a resolution, she calls a motion, a resolution in either house charging Section 3 of the 14th Amendment violation identifies the conduct, identifies the public record as proof of the conduct, and then it comes to the floor for a vote. Even if it doesn't come to the floor for a vote, whatever is alleged in the resolution will stand after the expiration of whatever days it automatically is supposed to come to the floor for a vote. In the House, it's 2 days for a privileged resolution. In the Senate, it's like 10 days for a privileged resolution. But talking about it, no, will not do the job. And, you know, this is where people misleading other people like this are screwing it all up. This is what Donald Trump did. He lied to the American people. They listened, they believed it, and now here we are with Donald Trump. So Ms. Denson is no better than Donald Trump. She thinks she's doing something to help, but this is where you have a non-lawyer standing around trying to play lawyer and doesn't understand that their actions have consequences.
What do you think about a representative or senator? I think they would have more weight if it was a senator do it, raising the issue of amnesty.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's a senator or representative. What matters is the document itself. What matters is what it speaks to as to rebellion to the Constitution. Not insurrection, rebellion. Rebellion to the Constitution and congressional laws. That's what matters. Yet she wants to lead the question and set it up as wrong as she's always understood it.
To bring to the forefront, Donald Trump is a disqualified insurrectionist right now. He cannot be cleared for this office that he illegally inhabits unless 2/3 of both houses remove that disqualification.
And that's
What do you think
correct.
about that?
Well, I think there was a powerful argument that he had engaged in lending aid and comfort to an insurrection. And that's what we had on January 20th.
He's an adjudicated insurrectionist in 3 different venues, if not 4.
Yeah.
Now, Painter said one thing, Jessica Denson heard another. Painter said he lent aid and comfort to an insurrection. The insurrection that Painter is describing is the riot. Now, that is what is required for an insurrection to be an insurrection. It has to be physical force of a group of people going on. Denson goes on and says he's an adjudicated insurrectionist. No, he's not. Supreme Court just said that the state court does not have jurisdiction to make that determination. That's why the order was vacated. And besides, forget insurrection. It's rebellion. Rebellion to the Constitution and congressional laws. That is where the power lies. Not calling him an insurrectionist. Let's move on.
And I think there's a lot of evidence of that. And in the Colorado case, all the Supreme Court said is the state of Colorado can't unilaterally make that decision, that it's really a decision for Congress.
They didn't touch his status as an adjudicated.
Blows over his head, her head again. Richard Painter has got it right. He's saying that the Supreme Court said that Colorado doesn't have the jurisdiction to do that. In legal terms, legal words, that's what the Supreme Court said in Trump v. Anderson. The fact that she's now trying to say they didn't touch the question of insurrection. Listen to this.
Insurrectionists. All they said was they couldn't remove him from the ballot. Solely a ballot issue.
Exactly right. The Supreme Court never ruled on whether his conduct rose to the level of insurrection within the meaning of 14th Amendment, Section 3.
And that's the problem. Forget insurrection. But that's the way Crew and Bonifaz, Sherman, Bookbinder, that's the way they framed the argument. That's why they lost. There is no insurrection. It was a rebellion to the Constitution. Had they framed it properly, we'd be talking about the proper thing. All right? Insurrection is not something that is easily adjudicated in either a state or federal court. And it doesn't need to be, because rebellion is a summary determination. Is there a law that you are resisting and you are purposely resisting it? That's rebellion. Ding dong, lights on, nobody's home.
This is something I think is a continuing conversation we need to have, because that's the first time ever the Confederate flag went into the Capitol building. They didn't get in there during the Civil War.
Okay, so yes, Painter. Yes, Painter. Yes, Painter. But that's not anything legal. It's just ugly. It's not anything legal. Now, the Confederate flag, it was, what he's trying to say is that is an insurrection because it represents a foreign faction, internal rebellious government, the Confederacy. They're flying their Confederate flag. So at least one person was there as an insurrectionist flying the Confederate flag. But that's not the point. The point is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment works by actually filing a document. It may look like the same resolution that Representative Thananar filed. The articles of impeachment that he's filed, while truthful, do not describe the laws violated, like Mr. Painter has described at least the one of 18 U.S.C. 208, where Musk is interfering with and taking money for himself by awarding himself contracts and stripping other agencies that would have been investigating him. So she's hearing one thing, he's saying another.
Abraham Lincoln was able to hold the line. They got a Confederate flag in there on January 6th, 2021. And a lot more than that. Yeah, I mean, that was a real live insurrection attempt to overthrow the United States government.
Insurrection attempt. Okay, that's where it all stops, and it's irrelevant. It was a riot. Those people, many of them were convicted, some of seditious conspiracy. None of them were convicted under 18 U.S.C. 2383 because that's incitement to insurrection or rebellion. Incitement. That would have been Donald Trump, but that doesn't matter. That would have been what Jack Smith should have charged Donald Trump with. But those who were convicted of 18 U.S.C. 2384, which Trump then has now all pardoned, those were the insurrectionists, not Donald Trump. Donald Trump was a rebellionist, and he violated Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1, attempting to stay in power using the fake elector scheme. These are the things Ms. Denson can't seem to comprehend. She would be a very bad law student when asked to brief the order of Trump v. Anderson and take it apart and tell the class what it says and why it says it. Because she doesn't seem to be able to understand anything. She just wants it to magically happen that Mr. Trump is disqualified because she said he is. She doesn't understand the steps in law. You saw somebody murder someone. Great. And you say he just put him in jail. No. You got to find the evidence, find the proof. Someone's got to register a complaint. The complaint has to be sometimes taken before a grand jury. So an indictment is done. And then it goes to a court and the evidence is presented. And then after that, if there's a jury trial, if it's a jury trial, the jury votes. And then he's convicted. Well, that's the way Section 3 works. First you saw the conduct. Oh, yeah, bad news. So then you find a public record that proves that the conduct was done and that you now have proof that he did the conduct? Because, you know, what if it was done in a dark room late at night? If you don't have any proof, you don't have any proof. And, you know, this is how Trump is operating. And then you distill it to an indictment, a complaint, which is the resolution. And then that's filed with the clerk of whichever chamber of the Congress that you're filing it in. And then you wait the required 2 days or 10 days. A vote is taken. And then if the 2/3 majority vote to excuse that conduct you have just alleged and proven is not reached, then they're disqualified. Then they're barred from office. The bar to office is the disqualification. If it happens in one house, he fails, then he's failed in both. If it happens to succeed in one house, then it goes to the second house, and if he fails there, then he's failed in both. But it does not happen like she keeps saying it happens. And this is where she's misleading thousands of people, because she's wrong. This is Anthony Davis's 5-minute news. There's the URL up at the top. There is the full title. And here is the date it was posted, May 1st. Now, he's one of the few people at this point, because he did have on Dr. Bandy Lee, you know, Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. He does a Sunday, I forget what the name of the show is on Sunday, but Dr. Lee explained how Trump is into dementia. So let's just listen in here for a minute.
The ABC interview with Donald Trump in the Oval Office with Terry Moran was fascinating for several reasons. Firstly, it exposed that Donald Trump clearly is on the receiving end of elder abuse, that he really knows nothing about.
It's not elder abuse, okay? Because Trump is willingly doing this. So, you know, don't use legal terms that you don't really understand. You're trying to sensationalize this. It's not elder abuse. Trump thinks that he is fully in charge, and he wants to do this. Elder abuse is where the person doesn't want to do this, and they're being pushed to do it, and other things might be being done, like withholding food and, you know, not cleaning up their feces if they're in a bed and they crap themselves. Those kinds of things. That's elder abuse. You know, oh, I don't know what to say. Let's go on.
About what's going on in his administration, only what he reads in the newspapers. And it's very clear to me that there are people with a much more focused and ambitious.
Trump has always been that way. He's always been short-sighted and stupid. And that would be the proper way to describe this. Trump doesn't want to know much more than what he wants to know. He doesn't want to hear details. He doesn't want to learn. He doesn't want to do a job that is very complex today. That's why to him it's so simple to go back to tariffs, he thinks.
Attitude towards shifting the US to a dark, dangerous, authoritarian place that are clearly pulling the strings. Donald Trump claims that he doesn't make the decisions, that he can't call the El Salvadorian president to get Kilmar Abrego Garcia back because there are lawyers and they're the ones who are making the decisions. I mean, it was really, really odd. And so I thought it would be worth us looking.
Because Trump has realized that a lot of things he does on his own get him into trouble. So he thinks listening to his lawyers keeps him out of trouble. He knows and he thinks that the immunity decision is going to protect him for all official acts. But he also knows that if he does something on his own and it's stupid, he's going to hear about it from his staff. And so then he feels like a child, you know, and his lawyers and whatever complain. So he doesn't want that feeling. It's not odd. He's stupid. He's always been stupid. His own sister said he's effing stupid. And so many other people have said that. A Wharton School of Business professor told us he's the dumbest GD student he ever taught. You're looking at it wrong.
Looking at some of the most extreme moments in this interview and talking about how Donald Trump really is a puppet of who? The oligarchs, Vladimir Putin, but also people closer to home, people like Stephen Miller, working in the Oval Office with...
Now, Stephen Miller is probably the problem. Stephen Miller is not an attorney, but he runs this law firm that I can't call the name of. But you can run a law firm and not be an attorney because you've hired attorneys to do the actual legal work. But there is a serious mistaken issue that because you're that close to lawyers, you have power as an attorney. Stephen Miller has conceptually got so much crap wrong. He's probably the one getting all of this wrong. These executive orders, this crap that they're doing by executive order that's illegal. It's probably Stephen Miller, who's the president of the United States.
A direct line to others who are really deciding the fate of many of these policies and their effects on American citizens.
Hello, everybody. How are you? This is the Oval Office. This is the Resolute Desk, which is really something very spectacular. There's nothing quite like it. I see Ronald Reagan over there. Yeah, Ronald right to your left. Being in the Oval Office is very important. Save Ronald Reagan here and put him a little bit larger. It sort of seemed to...
Now, what you'll notice is he's like a little child. There's just a lack of maturity in how Donald Trump behaves. This is a sign of dementia. Now, Terry Moran, you need to go watch this clip from Anthony Davis yourself fully. I'm going to try and zip to a part where he's combative.
Losing $1.5 trillion to $2 trillion a year, not sustainable. They were taking advantage of us like they've never. I could have left it that way, and at some point there would have been an implosion like nobody's ever seen.
It's clear to me that he cares really only about the image that he portrays in the newspapers, and to care for people, to be a president for all Americans, and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
We're going to have 21 million people, and we have to get a lot of them out because they're criminals. We're going to have to act fast. We can't. Do you think we can give 21 million trials? Let's say each trial takes 2 weeks. Is that what you want us to do?
And this is the part where he thinks a hearing is a trial. He keeps confusing a hearing as, taking a lot of time. And I don't know if it's him or if it's Stephen Miller but they're clearly trying to go around the courts. And he's trying to justify this by saying, they elected me to get this done right away. Now let me back up and see, well, let me just let it keep going. You can go watch this yourself.
Sir, the law's the law. The law doesn't say anything about trials.
No, not trials, hearings. I said
These
hearings.
people came in, they're not citizens, they came in illegally, they came into our country illegally, we have to get them out.
There's a legal process for that.
I can't, sure, and we follow the legal process. I can't have a trial, a major trial for
saying
every
that.
person that came in illegally. We have thousands of murderers that came in. They're going to murder people.
And this is where, dementia comes in. Because Terry Moran has told him repeatedly, it's not a trial, it's a hearing. It's not a trial. And you can't get it through Trump's head that a trial and a hearing are not the same. Trump's been involved in these long trials, so everything he thinks that goes on in the legal system takes as long as what he has taken in terms of trials. The New York case and the things that he's been involved in legally are just consuming a lot of time. So he thinks every appearance before a judge takes that length of time. A hearing can be 5 minutes. A hearing could be 30 seconds. A hearing is simply what proof do you have that you're not MS-13? And then if they can't do it, can't make the proof, then it's over. And then then a deportation can go forward. So, but Trump, this is where he is a child not understanding.
They already have murdered people in our country.
Right, so
we have to get them out,
they're
and we have to
bad
get them
guys,
out fast.
really bad guys. But in our country, even bad guys get due process, right?
If people come into our country illegally, there's a different standard. These are illegal. They came in illegally.
But they get due process.
Well, they get a process where we have to get them out. Yeah.
Okay, let's.
And this is pro-per craziness. Pro-per craziness. He doesn't understand what due process is. It's a process. He wants to redefine it. And he keeps insisting that there's a different standard. This is someone who cannot see to the fact that the laws be faithfully executed. Why? Well, for one, he's not an attorney. And so this is the best argument that can be made to not ever allow a person in the White House as the head of seeing to laws being faithfully executed who is not an attorney. His view of how laws faithfully executed is the mob boss tactics that he's describing and he wants to use. It's wacko.
Talk about the Venezuelans.
They get whatever my lawyers say.
This is the moment that he clarifies his position, and clearly the position of the White House counsel and those, clearly Tom Homan and Kristi Noem and any of these people who are doing work at the border, that they do not believe that people who are not Americans, born in America, not even naturalized citizens, not even immigrants who have paperwork that gives them indefinite leave to remain or any of these things, they just think that anybody that is not as American as Donald Trump doesn't deserve due process, doesn't deserve to be up in front of an immigrant.
And that's where Anthony Davis is correct. But what he never says is, this is a violation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. When you're talking about removing someone from office, it's a different standard than when you're, trying to convict someone in a criminal court or a civil court. In the issue of removing someone from office using Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, you simply need to identify the law violated in rebellion to the Constitution. The Constitution and congressional laws are set there for a reason, to be followed by members of government. When they don't do that, they are fired by the Constitution. They are barred from holding office. They are removed. In this case, 18 U.S.C. 241 would apply because he's intending to injure, oppress, threaten, and intimidate a whole group of people. This is how they're operating. It does not promote justice, domestic tranquility, nor to form a more perfect union. But no one ever speaks to the law. They speak to these concepts. And the issue is, this is what dementia looks like. Not only does Trump have dementia, he has never had the ability to understand law, legal concepts. And it appears Jessica Denson suffers from the same thing. She does not have the ability to understand the nuances of law and the legal concepts that are needed to effectuate a removal of Trump under the Constitution. Now, we'll just go on. You can see this is a 30-minute segment of the 5-minute news. And you can see how combative Trump has been.
Judge doesn't deserve to even have a case, and therefore they should be deported. And the thing that we also need to remember is that Trump is not deporting people back to their home countries necessarily, or their places of birth. He's deporting many of them to concentration camps in countries that they've never been to before, such as El Salvador. And this is...
So, this is not a deportation. It's a contract incarceration. And there's a difference. That also is violating congressional laws. Basically, they're kidnapping them and holding them elsewhere. You know, people can't speak in terms of the law because many of them don't understand it. But this is the time where people need to get with it, and they need to get with understanding the law. Because you can't speak in emotional terms and think that that's ever going to work, because it's not. Until you use a hard and fast law, like saying Trump is injuring, oppressing, threatening, and intimidating people, and it's a violation of 18 U.S.C. 241, it's a violation of his oath of office, it's a violation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and it justifies him being removed from office. It's not going to go anywhere. So let's zip forward and see what we can find something else where Trump is speaking.
Trump knew that it was photoshopped, but he was using it, and this was his excuse for deporting him to El Salvador. And it turns out that Trump, and I assume that he genuinely doesn't know that those letters on the knuckles were photoshopped.
This is not an innocent, wonderful gentleman from Maryland.
I'm not saying he's a good guy. It's about the rule of law. The order from the Supreme Court stands,
He
sir.
came into our country illegally.
You could get him back. There's a phone on this desk.
I could.
You could pick it up, and with all the power of the presidency, you could call up the president of El Salvador and say, send him back right now.
And if he were the gentleman that you say he is, I would do that.
But the court has
he's
ordered
not.
you to facilitate that.
I'm not the one making this decision. We have lawyers that don't
president.
want to do this.
But the buck stops in this office.
No. I follow the law. You want me to follow the law? If I were the president that just wanted to do anything, I'd probably keep him right where he
Supreme
is.
Court says what the law is.
Listen, I was elected to take care of a problem. We have to get him out, and we're doing it. And you'll pick out one man, but even the man that you picked out, he said he wasn't a member of a gang. And then they looked, and on his knuckles, he had MS-13.
There's a dispute.
Wait a minute. He had MS-13 on his knuckles tattooed.
Oh, he had some tattoos that are interpreted that way. But let's move on.
Wait a minute. Hey, Terry.
He did not have the letter MS-13.
It says MS-13.
That was Photoshop. So let me
That was Photoshop. Terry, you
He
should
had
have
that.
Hey, they're giving you the big break of a lifetime. You know, you're doing the interview. I picked you because, frankly, I never heard of you, but that's okay. I picked you, Terry, but you're not being very nice. He had MS-13 tattooed.
We'll agree to disagree. I want to move on to something else.
Terry, do you want me to show you the picture?
I saw the picture.
And you think it's Photoshop? Well,
Here we go.
Don't Photoshop it. Go look at his hand. He had MS-13.
He did have tattoos that can be interpreted that way. I'm not an expert on them. I want to turn to Ukraine.
No,
sir. I want to get to Ukraine.
No. He had MS as clear as you can be, not interpreted. This is why people no longer believe the news, because
When
it's
he was
fake
photographed
news.
in El Salvador, they aren't there. But let's just go. They aren't there when he's in El Salvador.
They weren't there, but they're there now.
And he's trying to tell him, you've seen Obregón Garcia in El Salvador, and all of a sudden, the tattoos are not there. They never were there. They're photoshopped. But Trump, this is dementia. Trump is so thick-headed. He cannot admit that he's wrong and that he's been maybe misled by others. And he's looking like a fool. Well, he's always been a fool. All you have to do is, look up videos about Trump on the internet from as he grows up, and as there's just a lot of them out there. Trump has always been this way. He's always been a racist. He's always been trying to justify his position, which has always been ridiculous. And Moran is trying to tell him the tattoos are not on his knuckles. You can't just erase a tattoo, but you can Photoshop it, and it didn't even need to be his hands. They were not there, ever.
Now, right?
No, they're in your picture.
Terry,
Ukraine, sir.
he's got MS-13 on his knuckles.
All right.
Okay?
We'll take a look.
You do such a disservice.
We'll take a look at
Why
that,
don't you
sir.
just say, yes, he does, and, go on to something else?
It's contested.
In other photos, there is no MS-13. In this kind of Helvetica, this size 14 is really not how a gang member would want to kind of present their membership of the gang. But that aside, Donald Trump repeatedly goes back to this, and even when the reporter tries to move on, Trump goes, no. Do you want to look at the photo? I'll show you the photo. He had MS-13. And if Trump is that gullible about something that is so obvious to anybody with critical thought, that a photograph has clearly been photoshopped, if he's that gullible about that, think how gullible he is about other things that people bring to him and pass across his desk for signature. Just think about the number.
And, go look it up. Go call it up yourself and watch this. There is the URL up at the top. We're going to close with Richard Reich and his Coffee Clutch show with Heather Locklear. There's the full title. It's his page, Robert Reich. The URL is up there at the top. And this is the date it was posted, May 3rd. This is only here to illustrate that people are attributing what is clearly dementia of Trump to some kind of delayed intellect, when the reality is he's into decline. His dementia is combative. This is how old people get when they've been challenged and they realize they're wrong. They just come back at you with a fight.
It's great that all these university presidents came together. I think of Trump 24 hours ago or whenever it was saying, I'm still going after Harvard's C3 status.
I think, actually, all of this momentum that's being created against him is actually, in the short term, making him feeling even a more furious.
I know.
He doesn't back down. He doesn't want to back down. But he did have to back down from Harvard, initially. He did have to back down from China. I mean, he does. When he faces immovable objects,
Right.
and he senses it, and I think he's going to sense it soon when all of these groups start coming together against him.
And having to back down even a little bit for a narcissist. I mean, the Mike Walls thing.
And, that illustrates, Robert Reich is old too. And you'll find out in this particular YouTube channel, Heather is constantly feeding him and propping him up with his slowness and correcting him. Mr. Trump is, you can't make what Trump is doing look like it's intelligence. Wright talking about, I think he'll see it soon. No, he'll never see it. Somebody will tell him, you have to give up on this. Someone will put him in a corner and say, you have to give up on this. It's not going to go anywhere. Your numbers are falling, and you've already been impeached. They're coming in any way they can. Now, recently there was a video released by the Democrats where, by Midas Touch, where Ben Meiselas is talking about the GOP is running scared because the GOP won't talk to the Democrats in committees. They just rubber stamp whatever that Donald Trump wants done, and they're not going to debate it. They're not going to talk about it. And Ben Meiselas interprets this somehow that GOP is running scared. They're not running scared. They just realize they don't need to talk to you. They're not going to talk about this shit because they're not going to change their minds. And I don't know what to tell you. Democrats are some dumb-dumbs. These people do not know how to fight. They, in a war, would lose because we're losing right now. They're losing right now. And it's very simple. At one point, it's said that Democrats have a herd mentality. If Schumer or Jeffrey says do it, then they'll do it. If he doesn't, then they won't. Jeffrey said he didn't even know that those impeachment articles were coming. He didn't know they were going to be filed because Thanedar, who is a freshman congressman, it's his first term in a brand new district that was recently created with a staff on which he does not even have a staff attorney, threw that together. And people like Jessica Denson, wants to read from it and thinks that it's important. And it is completely legally insufficient. It would not support a trial. What are you convicting for? I understand that impeachment is a political amorphous, adjudication. And they could charge him with looking at a cow wrong and impeach him for that and throw him out of office, technically. But to get the articles of impeachment beyond the House, any lawyer, Republican or Democrat, would look at this and say, these are completely insufficient. I cannot vote to support this because they're insufficient. Go back and redo them. Put something in there, as is said in the previous video. But you have people like Jessica Denson thinks, because they're filed, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Well, those articles are not. But if Mr. Thanedar can be convinced to refile with a resolution calling for the amnesty vote, that will have a force and effect that nobody can ignore. Now, the problem is that, Mr. Johnson has pulled this stunt where the entire session is considered one day. So, even on a privileged resolution, it will never get to the floor for a vote because the next day never comes. But that doesn't mean that, in a calendar sense, the resolution would not automatically trigger. And after that, the Democrats could just declare, well, 3 days have passed, it didn't come to the floor for a vote, so the vote is no. Meaning, no one's going to excuse this conduct. Meaning now, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment has been actualized. Now, Trump is disqualified and barred from office and required to vacate the office of president. He'll sit up there and say, no, I don't have to. He'll try and run to the Supreme Court and say they can't do this. The Supreme Court will be forced to look at their own order. If somebody is clever enough to put it back in their face, and the Supreme Court's already said, no, this is what they do. This is how it's done. We don't have jurisdiction. All we can do is give an opinion on whether or not what you were charged with is a rebellion to the Constitution of the United States. And then the Supreme Court would have to look at it and say, this, and this are rebellions to the United States because they are rebellions to the congressional laws. All of your executive orders are rebellions to seeing to the laws being faithfully executed. You are trying to execute the laws, not actually follow them. You're trying to kill the law instead of follow it. So all of this flies in your face. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says that is not what the president does. Constitution says you are to faithfully execute the laws. That is not what you've done. So yes, this is a valid application of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and you were voted down. Even if they did not vote, you cannot turn a day into the entire session. So therefore, the calendar days, apply, and it's over. It could be done also in the Senate. Now, Jessica Denson has got it completely wrong. They don't even need to file a motion, This person, this is what you get when you get a pro-per person who doesn't know the law, doesn't know anything. They start saying crazy stuff. Well, you know what? Sounds a lot like Trump, doesn't it? That's how ding-dongish they both are. Denson and Trump. Birds of a feather flock together. So, we're going to close on that, but rest assured, Trump has dementia. Not only does he have dementia, aside from that, he is a racist. He's a xenophobe. He is everything that is antithetical to what the Congress and the Constitution says an American president should be. Congress can simply say, you're fired. You won't follow the contract that you were hired under, i.e. the Constitution and the congressional laws. You're fired. And it's that simple. There's nothing really, really complicated about it. Now, you want to make it complicated? You go through an impeachment trial. You go through a whole lot of stuff on a full-blown trial, which Trump was complaining about. I can't have a trial, and he's talking about immigration. But the bottom line is, he doesn't even need a trial. This is a summary adjudication, also known as a summary judgment, which occurs when there are no triable issues of fact. So, there is no judge. The judge is the Congress. The Congress votes and says, no, we're not going to excuse that conduct. And by that and that alone, that disqualifies Mr. Trump. That is what will cause his need to vacate the office. And at that point, the Democrats could move on and start on other members of Congress who are similarly in rebellion to the Constitution, or who launch a rebellion to the Constitution through that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment vote. At that point, it looks like it might get ugly. And I'm not sure, they might have to move down the list, throw Pam Bondi out, throw everybody out, and then call the marshals and move Trump out of the White House. It won't be pretty, because nothing is pretty about Trump. He is crazy. He's been crazy all his life. And, when people are crazy, they don't know they're crazy. But the fact that he had a copy of Mein Kampf by his bed, and that he followed Hitler, none of this should surprise anybody. Why are we talking about it? Why are we even talking about it as though we're surprised? Hit like and subscribe. It would help, because people like Denson, who are out there with the wrong information, have got a huge number of followers. Our little channel doesn't have any followers, but we are the ones with the correct information. I can guarantee you that.